Hello and welcome to Games Past the Prime. This is a show where I take a look at video games to determine if they are past their prime or not. For me to do so though, there are a couple key categories which I look at. Story, presentation, and gameplay. Then at the very end there's a conclusion section where I wrap everything up in a nice little bow. You guys have read the title. You know what game we're playing. Let's take a look at Medal of Honor Frontline. The story of Medal of Honor Frontline is sort of what you would expect for a World War II first-person shooter, but in case you don't know it, I will lay out exactly what this specific game covers. You play as a character named Jimmy Patterson, and the very first mission you are on is that iconic D-Day mission, which in my mind is one of the best D-Day missions in most first-person shooters that I have played. After Jimmy helps to take the beach, OSS, also known as Office of Strategic Services, sends him to disrupt the German U-boat operations. During this, Jimmy is able to find some intel and relay it back to OSS. They soon discover that the Germans are building a secret weapon, but their contact in the Dutch resistance has sadly gone missing. Because of this, OSS sends Jimmy to meet up with the 82nd Airborne during Operation Market Garden to find this contact. Oh, and before I get too far here, most of the story here is actually based on true events, and I don't mean that in the only 5% way. I mean most of what I will be saying here did actually happen. The main difference is obviously one man named Jimmy didn't do all of these things. There was no super soldier like Captain America here. After Jimmy finds the contact and rescues him from the Germans, OSS learns that the secret weapon is a highly advanced jet fighter called the HO-9. Jimmy's job is to now destroy the aircraft. However, en route he has to cross the Nijmegen Bridge, disarm the explosives on it, and send supplies to the British 1st Airborne Division trapped in Arnhem. The OSS tracked down the man in charge of building the jet fighter, Rudolf Albrecht von Stromgeist, who I believe is another faked name person who is there to represent a direct villain for you to fight. Jimmy is sent to Emmerich to track down Stromgeist, but once aboard his personal train, Jimmy is unable to catch up to him before Stromgeist manages to make his escape. While failing to capture him, Jimmy was able to destroy some vital German supplies. Jimmy is then able to track down Stromgeist and the jet fighter to an airfield outside Gotha. Jimmy manages to cripple the Germans' aircraft production while here. He fights and kills Stromgeist, and is then able to escape the airfield by stealing the jet fighter HO-9. Now, this last part of the story is actually also true. While it didn't happen exactly in this fashion, the US was able to steal an HO-9 version 3 and ship it back to the States, which was very interesting to me because I honestly thought this part was the most fake out of everything. Honestly, the story here is actually pretty well told. Between the cutscenes and the mission briefings, it tells the story itself out to tell without really any issues. It's rare nowadays to see military first-person shooters with any real story detail, so it was fun to come back to this and see the clear passion that these guys had when making this game. Now, let's talk about the graphics. Of course, this game is being played on the PS2, and you can clearly see that the graphics look pretty good overall. I honestly don't have really that many complaints about it. The models look good, and the weapons look well done, and have some good detail to them as well. However, if there is one thing I will complain about, it is how dark the game looks. I don't mean as in a lack of color either, because when it's light out, there are plenty of nice looking colors which I appreciate since you tend to not see much color in these sort of settings. No, I mean a lot of the missions felt like they were either played at nighttime or in very dark warehouses. It got so hard to see for me that I even tried to turn up the brightness on my TV, and this didn't even help enough either. I had to at times actually play on my computer monitor where I can see the captured video. For some reason it was brighter here and I could see in the dark much better. However, I shouldn't need to do this to play the game. It's a bit crazy just how dark some of these areas really got. Maybe I just have bad eyes or something though. But I'll try and show you what I saw, but you will likely just see how the video looked captured, and that can nearly guarantee you that it looked darker on my TV for some reason. Now let's move on to the sounds. And here is where I think this game shines very well. See, while the story of Jimmy doesn't have really much voice acting except for in-game with some characters you meet, you instead, in between major chapters, get these cutscenes that look like they are real videos taken from that time period. In fact, I'm pretty sure they are videos taken from that time, which honestly is a nice touch and adds a bit of realism to the game. Now I want to talk about the gun sounds, because here they actually sound really good. Each gun has its own unique sound, and it matches closely to what you would imagine that gun to sound like. Again, just another thing that adds that bit of realism into the game, something you don't see as much anymore, so I really want to commend them for doing this. Then of course we have to talk about the music, and at first I wasn't really all that impressed. This is because the music very much takes a backseat to everything else going on, and pretty rarely did I actually get time to just listen to the music. However, once I sat down and found the soundtrack and just listened to it, I was actually kind of blown away. The music is actually really good if you like the orchestra type music. As you listen to it, you can find how it matches the game very well, because some of the music has this sort of slow and soft sound to it, but then seems to amplify higher later in the tracks. It's so well done because it just seems to capture those small moments in between firefights, but then the music just happens to rise and get louder in those big moments. I'm honestly just a bit surprised that I didn't really notice it before. Well, without me droning on more about it, I'll just let you listen to a couple tracks and maybe you'll see why I actually kind of liked it and how it seems to fit in the game so well. So, Medal of Honor Frontline is one of the easiest games to classify. It's simply an FPS, not much more than that. Sure, it's got a couple of puzzles here and there, but most of the game is just you running around shooting the bad guys and completing the objectives. It's a pretty simple game when you think about it from that point of view. Now, there are plenty of missions to play, and there are a variety of different types as well. You will have the missions where you just need to run around killing everything. You'll get missions where you will need to help another soldier, and while this does sound like one of those follow and protect quests, thankfully, it really doesn't feel like one of those. You also get sabotage missions and stealth missions, though these don't really require you to be stealthy at all, which is kind of funny. I didn't really get that bored of this game because there was plenty of different environments to look at and different areas you'll get to see. Like I said earlier, one of my few complaints I have with this game is that it tends to run a bit on the darker side and can be difficult to see. There's also not really any map system, so sometimes with that in combination with the dark, you may end up getting a bit lost or not sure where to go, only to find that there is a dark hallway you can go down that looked like a wall, or in one case, where it did look like a hallway, but in fact was just a wall. So when I got stuck in this area, I started to look around and none of the other doors would open. So I went back to this weird dark corner, and when I went into it and turned and looked up, I could see sort of a bit of light. When I moved forward, I saw that this dark area was actually just stairs. The only reason I saw this was actually on my monitor where it wasn't quite as dark. While I was looking at the TV, there is absolutely no way I would have noticed that these were actually stairs at all. And the reason why I didn't even notice them the first time I went into this dark corner is because the stairs actually kind of go up at a different angle, so it doesn't go straight up when you walk into the dark corner. You actually have to turn and then go up the stairs, something I would not have noticed otherwise. So that is a bit of a problem and could even be considered a bit annoying, but thankfully, most of the time when I found myself getting lost in a dark area, it only took a couple of minutes to find where I was actually supposed to go. There was only like 2 or 3 times where it took longer than that, and after the first time I found myself just looking over at the monitor when I did get in these situations. Now, I don't want to just pass this off because I was in a different situation than most people who might be playing this game. They might be playing it on the TV, and in that case, I could really see how this could get pretty upsetting. With that out of the way though, I do want to address one thing I really did like about this game. See, most first-person shooters I've been playing recently have been trying their best using only one movement stick. Obviously, most people know this type of movement is very odd and doesn't exactly feel natural nowadays. For the very first time on this channel, I got to play a game that uses both sticks. Huzzah! In case you don't know what this means, the left stick on the controller will allow you to move forward, backward, and strafe side to side, and the right stick on the controller will basically control where you are looking. So push down, you look down, push up, you look up, etc. Since I'm already talking about the controls, let's just talk about the rest of the controls while we're at it. Alright guys, so I wanted to show you the movement real quick, just to show you kind of how smooth it actually is. So you got the left stick here that will move you forward and backward, and strafe left and right. Then you can control sort of the head movement with this right stick here. So you got the right, left, up, down. Now this is super nice and not something that I have seen a lot, at least on this channel. Obviously I've seen it in newer FPS games and so on, but in this channel this is the first time we've had FPS controls like this, and it is so nice to come back to and have that. Now one thing I will say is that it does have sort of a sensitivity on this left stick. So if I move it just slightly forward, you can kind of see that I barely move forward in comparison to full sprinting or full back. So what makes this interesting is that the faster you move, the more likely you will be heard by the AI, and that is very interesting to me. That's not something I have really witnessed yet on this channel. So I kind of like how they were able to implement that. Now L1 on the top here will aim, while R1 will shoot. Now you can move, you know, pretty much any way you want and to a degree. So when you're aiming, you can fully move your head around, but you can only lean left, right, and that's pretty much it. You can't actually move forward or backwards kind of like you normally would. So you have to basically, you have to be very careful when you're aiming, basically what I'm saying. You have to actually position yourself properly. Now one thing you may have noticed while I'm aiming here is that the movement is pretty slow. You can kind of see it doesn't turn very fast, but in comparison to when I'm not aiming, it is much quicker. So this is actually pretty frustrating to get used to. If you're anything like me, I actually prefer them to be kind of a 1-to-1 ratio. Some people like it faster, some people like it slower, that's kind of totally up to you. But it's just not my cup of tea. I prefer being able to have a 1-to-1 ratio. The downside is there is no sensitivity adjustment, so you cannot change this even if you wanted to. Alright, so we now move on to the next controls here. And we have R2, which is going to let you reload the gun. And L2 will allow you to crouch or stand. X is your action button. I don't really have anything to interact with here, but it would allow you to open up doors or, you know, place down objects when you need to in certain areas, stuff like that. Circle and square here are going to allow you to move through your inventory, as you can see on screen here. And sort of, square is going to be your back while circle's forward, so it just allows you to cycle through all of your weapons. And then you have triangle, which allows you to jump. Pretty simple. You have the left stick, so if I were to aim up, the left stick will center it back to the angle where I'm looking at, which is, I mean, I almost never use this to be completely honest with you. And then the right stick is going to do your melee attack. And then finally, if you were to aim with your sniper, you can zoom in and out by pushing up on the D-pad or down on the D-pad. And this is pretty much most of the controls. And the nice thing here is, if you actually don't like these controls, you can actually go into the option menu and change the control scheme. And they have a bunch of presets, but what makes it even nicer is that there's actually a customize preset, so you can customize the controls to be whatever you want. So complaining about the controls is kind of silly when you can change them to be kind of whatever you want. Obviously the only downside is not being able to change the sensitivity of the movement here, which is, I mean, this is really annoying. I don't like how slow this feels. I really wish there was a way to change this. I know that this became more common in later games to allow you to change the sensitivity, but obviously it was still a little too new for this game. Even not being able to move while aiming is a little bit of annoying, something you have to get used to for sure. But you can get used to this, and it's not really that bad as long as you properly time everything together. So that's the end of the control segment, so let's go ahead and jump to the next part of the script. Now that we are done talking about the controls, I do want to mention one other thing that I noticed that kind of did bother me at first, and while I continued to play it bothered me less, but it still was kind of annoying. See, right away you'll find that guns beyond a certain range are fairly inaccurate unless it's like a sniper or a single fire rifle. So when you pick up, say, pretty much any auto weapon, you will find yourself trying to shoot at people and missing quite a bit. Now, I just thought this was a distance thing, but even from medium range or even sometimes from close range, you'll find yourself still missing quite a bit. Now I know guns have recoil, and they aren't perfectly accurate, and frankly they shouldn't be, but I feel the spread in recoil seems a bit overdone in my opinion in this game. When I'm nearly face to face with somebody using an MP40, I shouldn't miss that much, yet it still seems to happen on this game enough that it truly did bother me. So if you are picking this up nowadays, you are used to most of your guns basically never missing. You may find yourself getting frustrated with this game. However, after you get used to this, you may find this actually is good to have. Because while it did bother me at times, I learned fairly quickly that each gun is very different from each other. They all have their own unique strengths and weaknesses. I actually found myself using a lot of the different weapons because all of them were useful in some form or another. This is a very nice thing to see because, again, nowadays most guns just feel the same. Rarely is there a reason to change the gun you use. So while I found the recoil and spread to be a bit much, I did appreciate the effort to make each gun feel different from one another. This is why I say it bothers me, but it doesn't anger me or make me upset. It's not even something I don't like. I actually do like the idea, I just feel they could have done better with a little less recoil and spread, but this is frankly just my personal opinion. I know plenty of people who like it purely as is because it could be considered more realistic to the time period, and frankly I'm not going to argue that. Now with that said, I think I covered pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about, so let's just move on to the verdict. The verdict of Medal of Honor Frontline is a game not past its prime. Honestly, it was great to come back and play an early FPS that used the twin stick setup. It's something I have very much missed going through these games with you guys, but even better than that, it showed me that my enjoyment of these games is still there. I don't play a lot of current FPS games anymore because I just get bored of them so fast. I thought it was just me kind of getting tired of the genre, but in fact it's more likely that those games are just not very good in my opinion. While going back and playing this game, I found my love for these games again, and I think I'll be playing more of them on this channel at some point. Hopefully the other Medal of Honor games from this time period are as good as this one. Now, let us move on to the top 5 reasons I believe this game is not past its prime. Number 1. The story is actually pretty well done. It does a good job at following real events that happened, while also allowing you to play through these events as well. The old school video footage is also kind of a nice touch. Number 2. The presentation is far better than I was expecting it to be. Sure, I knew the graphics wouldn't be bad because this was made on the PS2, but I didn't expect it to look as good as it does. Now the colors are a bit muted here and there, but thankfully there are signs of color, more than you'd expect to see in a World War II FPS nowadays. Then there's that music. That music is just so good. So much better than I originally gave it any credit for. Number 3. The gameplay is very solid. I've read that people at the time didn't like the controls, but I think this is simply because people weren't used to it at the time. But frankly, when I go back and read that, it just made me laugh really hard. It just goes to show that people really hate change, even if it is in fact better. Number 4. The guns feel quite unique, and I very much enjoy that about this game. Each gun has its own use case, and that is not something you really see anymore. While I did just get done complaining about the spread and recoil being a little too much, I don't think this destroys the core of the guns at all. It's something you for sure have to get used to, but the idea is just so well done that I had a lot of fun using all the different kind of weapons that I could find. Number 5. Honestly, this game is just fun, and it reminded me why I originally fell in love with FPS games back in the day. If, for whatever reason, you are finding yourself being bored by the new FPS games that are coming out now, I suggest that you go back and play the older FPS games, and you might remember why you played these games to begin with. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did enjoy watching it, please consider subscribing. I upload videos every Sunday. Stay tuned to the end of the video to get an audio hint at what my next video will be. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and thanks for watching.